Hey, welcome to a special episode of the Tasmeem Doha podcast. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Today on the series, we have Richard Lombard, who is the curator of this year's Tasmeem, which is titled Under Construction 2024. This should be a lot of fun. Richard, we've been working behind the scenes for a while, and so it's cool to have a public conversation about your work. Welcome.
Always good to be here, even though I've never been here before. But a big fan of what's happened so far and looking forward to continuing it.
I guess maybe a good place to start in terms of like centering the conversation is maybe giving a little background about your involvement with Tasmeem over the past decades.
Sure. So I came to Doha in 2010, and the first Tasmeem that I was exposed to was the 2011 version, Synapse, under Munira Spence and Pornpropa. And I was immediately struck by what an awesome thing this was. I had just come from New York, where one of my responsibilities was doing design conferences for a design company in the city. So this was sort of the ultimate version where you got to have everything that you wanted to do, clean slate, with a ton of freedom to do things. So jumped right in. Literally, it was one of the first things I did when I got on the ground and realized, wow, Tasmeem is an amazing opportunity. Drove around with the design director for Porsche in a Porsche, broke it at his suggestion, it was a wonderful time. And so I immediately thought, all right, I probably shouldn't be doing that. I immediately thought that this is something I'd like to be involved in, and began the process of submitting proposals for subsequent events, and then ultimately did chair, and it was a chair at the time. Chaired the 2015 edition with Simone Muscolino, Michael Hersrud, and Levi Hammett, known as Ajib, and have been back, moderated the 2019 version, did a workshop in the 2022 version. So feel like I've been doing a lot of Tasmeem over the past decade.
Do you feel like there is a different approach to this go versus previous iterations? So the title's Under Construction. Maybe we can start there. What is sort of the theme?
Okay, well, I mean, one of the things about Tasmeem that is both daunting and kind of amazing is the idea that each iteration is the brainchild of whomever is chosen to do it. So there is no, it's a continuum. There are, Tasmeems every 2 years. But it is the, the sole vision of whoever is chosen to do it. So this year, things happened a little bit differently. Obviously, I'm not a faculty member any longer. And this year, the 25th anniversary, there were a lot of things happening. And so there was a call that went to me and said, would you be interested in doing this? There was sort of a more committee-like approach to the way the event was going to be handled. Obviously, timeframes were short. We were doing things a little bit differently, but I am taking a look at the continuity of the event. How do we structure this event so that it perhaps works better? So Under Construction was honestly the third title that the event has had. And honestly, it came up very organically and wonderfully. It was, I had involved some interior design students in a charrette to design scenography, and a number of them, and sustainability was a big part of that. So a number of them suggested using reusable kits of parts, so construction equipment, scaffolding, those sorts of things. And we thought, that's a clever idea, easily available. And then an MFA student had a project whereby they had chosen as an object to kind of take a deep dive into a Jersey barrier, the standard roadside barrier that you see. And was literally standing there holding onto this thing, and there were a bunch of us standing around, and we just said under construction, and it stuck. And it settles very well for me in that creative research is a process of constant investigation, constant rebuilding of ideas, of methodologies. And so for a design school, it's a very apt kind of way to be, constantly active, constantly changing.
Yeah. So another term that people probably hear a lot and don't really know what it means, and it means many different things, but from your perspective, what does it mean to be a curator for this type of event, conference, gathering? What does that actually entail?
What it entails and what it means are oftentimes very different things. So we'll put that out there right at the beginning. But I think that curation is something that is super broad. You can curate a collection of Pez dispensers. You can curate a group of artists into the National Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. You can curate a lot of different things. And it effectively, it means coming up with an idea, how these things go together, and kind of packaging that for public consumption. I mean, I suppose, in the broadest sense, that's what curation is. When you're looking at design events, it's a many faceted thing, because it depends on who you're serving and what is the point of this? Who is your audience? What is the expectation, both from the perspective of the participants as well as the organizing body? So you have a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different factors that come into play.
But okay, so that's theoretical, right? But you, Richard, you're like, all right, I gotta do this thing.
Right. Something's got to happen on March 2nd.
Something's got to happen. What does that actually mean? And how did it play out for this year? I mean, let's say I'm showing up. What do you think, what sort of curatorial decisions did you make that we might actually be able to see the fruits of as a participant?
Well, the hope, so again, with this under construction theme, there is a focus on change, whether that is emotional change, whether that is physical change, transformation. I would hope that people pull from the program that's been assembled this notion that there's an evolutionary process that we are all a part of. And we have options as to how to make changes. So trying to bring in people who are changing the way we do things, changing the way we look at things, but also people who are in the business of preserving and not changing in the wrong way other elements, whether it's cultural, whether it's architectural heritage, this idea of the link between individual change, community change, global change. It's a building process. And so hopefully people will see the links between the participants in the workshops and the talks, and realize that, yes, they are participants in something that will hopefully lead to change, an improvement. Ultimately, that's the goal, is that we make things better. We change things for the better.
Let's talk about just some of the basics. When is it happening? Where is it happening? How can people show up? What can they expect?
So, Tasmeem Doha under construction will be happening March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Doha, Qatar. The bulk of the program will be happening within the Virginia Commonwealth University building in Education City. The initial intent had been to be more in the community, because that is part of the construction of the students, is to go out in the creative community and become part of the entity, the machine that is building the creative community. Logistics kind of got in the way of some of that, but we do have some programming happening out in the city. But the bulk of the program will happen here. We will have an open house day on March 2nd, which will feature a panel discussion, some exhibitions, and a keynote speaker at the end. And then Sunday and Monday are focused on workshops, which are primarily for students, but we will have openings for the community, as well as there will be 2 panel discussions, one on Sunday and one on Monday, that will both open and close the event.
Is it sort of designed for, is it primarily designed for practitioners, for students, for the public? How do you kind of think about the tone and for all this stuff?
So yeah, back in 2015, when the 4 of us were doing IGIB, we asked the dean at the time, and we said, "Who are we doing this for?" And her response was, "Well, that's up to you to decide." And we were sort of saying, "Well, are there any, is there something somewhere that states that this, we have to address this body, that body, that body?" And she said, "No, you choose who you think Tasmeem should be targeted towards." And our immediate response was, this is for the students. This is an opportunity for the students to engage with practitioners of a wide variety of backgrounds. And so our immediate thought was, all right, we're focusing all our energy on the student body. And I have to say that I've kept that for this edition. I very much want to have students involved in small workshops where they get very, very close contact with a practitioner. And some of those practitioners are outside professionals. Some of them are graduates of VCU. Some of them are faculty members from the Richmond campus. But the idea is to engage deeply with an idea and with a workshop leader, pick up a really good concept, and then use that as a tool in your further, educational and professional career.
Cool. Do you have any, we're a month out, but are you able to spill the beans on some things that people can expect?
Yeah, so we've got a hugely broad, program because, there are a lot of different interests. I'm thinking in terms of outside people. We have one of the elements of the open house day is we have a graphic design exhibition that was curated by Huda Abafares. And so 2 people who are featured in that, Wal Moros and Mois, are going to be both speaking as part of the program about the work that they've done in the gallery exhibition, but they're also going to be leading workshops. So Wal is doing 2 different workshops, and Mois is going to have one workshop focused on posters, which is appropriate given the fact that the bulk of the exhibition is made up of posters. We also have an interesting practitioner from the UK who is looking at accessibility in spaces. And so he's going to be looking at Oxygen Park, which is one of the sort of the more interesting spaces here on Education City. It's a large park area with a variety of different kind of structures to appeal to people. And so he's going to be walking people through sort of space, first of all, place-specific design, site-specific design, I guess you would say, but also looking from the perspective of not necessarily, furniture as it's described, playground furniture or, park furniture, but also auditory and visual ways of exploring a space. We will have Momen Swaitat from the Majaz Palestinian Sound Archive doing storage of self, which should be a really interesting kind of, again, looking at that, how do I build myself? How do I improve myself?
You said storage of self.
Yes, that is the title of the workshop.
Cool.
Storage of self. And I mean, from an archivist, you talk about a curator, he's an archivist. What's an archivist? are we not, are we archiving our own selves? I honestly, of all the workshops that I wish I could take, I can't take any of them. That's one that I would very much like to take. We also have, some graduates. You had Yasmin Suleiman on the program earlier. She's going to be running a workshop that's tied to this object that was kind of at the core of coming up with under construction. So she's going to be doing a mold making workshop. Who else do we have? You would think that they would just spill out of my mouth. We have a group coming from Australia. So this group is called Fologram. They're from Australia. And they make a really innovative augmented reality software product that is predominantly meant to build things. But they're a software company and they build software solutions. So they're going to be doing what is effectively a tutorial on their own equipment. But this, the students and the other participants in the workshop are basically, they got the VR goggles on, they see the plan in front of them, and they know exactly where to place something in real time. But this idea of, it's a totally new way of building things. So that's going to be a super interesting one. We have a former faculty member who's now custom making carbon fiber bikes. And he is going to be, he has a really wonderful kind of view on how we could all make our own carbon fiber bikes using materials that are widely available. And so he's going to be actually in an exhibition of bicycles that was put together by QM. And so this, the participants are going to be building a carbon fiber bike in an exhibition of bicycles that span hundreds of years of development. So again, the evolution of the bicycle leading up to the creation of a carbon fiber bicycle by multiple participants, a very sort of evolutionary. We see the first bikes and then we make one right on the spot. So I'm excited about that one as well. I suppose every single workshop I could say, yes, I'd like to take that.
When you guys do these types of workshops, or when you curate this whole program, are there like long-term consequences that you're hoping to see, or long-term trickle-down effects that you're hoping to enact, seeds you're hoping to plant that are related to the campus itself? Yeah.
Well, the thing that I've often, we're doing short workshops. So the idea is that we structured the program so that we have workshops on, I probably should have done it this way, workshops on Sunday afternoon and workshops on Monday morning. Two different slots so that, there's more flexibility. Some people are able to get off work in the morning. Some people are able to get off work in the afternoon. We're trying to make it, accessible. But they're two short workshops. So it's not one of these things where you spend 3 days learning how to do, the in-depth, process. The point is to plant a seed.
Yeah.
And the long-term goal that I always had in the back of my mind was the students are going to go into these workshops and they're going to hear a concept. They're going to see a technique. They're going to meet an individual in a context, or who works in a context that they could see themselves in. They take themselves out of this, I am just here to absorb information, but I can see how that output happens. I can see my place in the larger creative community. That was always in the back of my mind as that's what Tasmeem should do. Open doors to students so that they see their place in the community, here in Doha, back at home, wherever they want to be. But that's the seed.
If somebody's coming into this for the first time, I wonder if there are like philosophical differences between the experts that you're bringing in. Is there also because design means many things, and people can disagree about what design means, and even the nature of what a conference is, or the nature of what a design school is. And we've had all these different perspectives, not all of them, but we've had many different perspectives represented on this podcast series alone. So when you're going through the curatorial process, I wonder if you're thinking about, okay, I actually want to have a lot of different philosophical diversity during these few days as well.
Well, there's, yes, different approaches. And I would say that, so what I'm hoping in the panel discussions is to kind of drive just that disparity. Everybody's got sort of the same kind of track, but they're all approaching it from different perspectives. So for instance, the opening panel discussion, which was really meant to kind of kick off this idea of building, making, we will have a fashion person, an architect, and this tech company that I just mentioned, Fulagram. So the fashion individual, Bradley Dunklerk's, former Iris Van Herpen collaborator, currently working with a number of different initiatives, whether it's with designers or manufacturers. He works with the Japanese, they're a textile company, but they're bioengineering spider silk. It's a company called Spiber. So he's very much focused on the next generation of materials and how we're going to use them. We've got Faisal Tabata from American University of Sharjah, architect, most recently curated the UA Pavilion in the Venice Biennial, which was looking at arid development in arid climates and how we tend to look at arid areas as being devoid of any opportunity. You have to bring everything in. And his sort of take on it is, no, there's plenty of stuff here. You just got to know what to look for. And then we've got this technology company that is helping people build things in different ways. And so the hope is that each of those three people, they're presenting obviously their own work, but then the discussion that follows should engage this notion of, I don't necessarily see things the way you see them. So, because whether it's my industry or the modality of the way I work, I think digital fabrication has, taken us in the wrong direction. We've focused too much on, the ability of machines to do things where humans should be more involved. The point is they all share a common vision of the future, but they all see different ways of getting there. The closing panel is similarly looking at ideological building. So Momin from Majaz and this notion of archiving, Isabella Rossin, who's an urban sociologist locally here in Doha, working on preservation campaigns. And we have a representative from HBKU who is in the accessibility area. So this question of how do you preserve while moving forward, staying true to the past, while opening doors, for the future? It's a complicated thing, especially when you get into older places where you want to preserve the way the city worked, but at the same time, you also want to make it accessible to all. And that doesn't happen easily. So I'm hoping that there will be lively discussion between people who have different focal points. And that's the only way it's going to work, is that if we all listen to one another and we all work together to achieve, a future that, kind of works for all of us.
The people that you bring in, this idea of diverse perspectives. So like somebody like Wa'el Mur'us, who you mentioned earlier, who's very much a friend of the program. He's super familiar with the Arab world, having grown up in Lebanon, but also quite familiar with Qatar and with the GCC in general, the Gulf. Do you try to balance the number of people who are coming in who are super familiar versus some participants who are brand new, don't really have a ton of experience, and who are like bringing in a different perspective? You want to have cohesion, but at the same time, you want to have a broad, representative group. And one of the things I looked at was the progression. So we'll have some students who are involved in these workshops, as leaders. So students, faculty members, grads who are coming back to present to the school,
people from the region, people from outside the region. The notion is that everything is on this sort of either spectrum or continuum of possibilities. And so again, I kind of feel, so originally there was a sense that Tasmeem was about bringing outside people to the region. And this was the opportunity that Tasmeem brought. Sometimes, I would say more than sometimes, people come in and they're like, this is how we do it where we are. And it just bounces off because it's not relevant. When I first got here, I remember going to see these consultants speak about what Doha was going to do for 2030. And it's like, well, you're from Hong Kong and you're bringing this sort of package from Hong Kong to Doha. And it's like, does it really fit here? So you want to have sort of exoticism, but you also want to have familiarity, relatability, as well as, again, a bit of the unknown.
Yeah. Okay, just switching gears a little bit. Are you excited about it, or at this point, are you just exhausted?
And I think Basma said it the best, is that, time compresses as the event comes closer, and, you can't feel your fingers because you're just like, you're tense and you're trying to get everything to be in place. And then the event happens, and then you're immediately like, oh my God, that was great. That was so much fun. And I certainly remember that from 2015, that idea that, when the event first sort of, was coming closer, it was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. What have we done? But then it was probably the highlight of my, career here at Doha. It was just, I loved it. I am excited, especially to finally get this thing out there. Because the time frames are short and because I've been off site, there's been a little bit more of this, not only under construction, but under wraps, because there hasn't been that organic connection of me being in the environment, people seeing me, and people hearing me. So I'm looking forward to getting the website, which should be days away, if not hours away from going live. And so, just to sort of pull the covers off of this thing so that people can start to feel what it is. And once I think it gets out in the open, I think I'll be much more excited. It's just that push to get it out the door that has me a little less than excited. It's a lot of logistics, and I brought it on myself, but we have 20 workshops, 3 panel discussions, so that's 9 speakers, a keynote speaker. And if we can dub something in later, I would love to be able to do that. But yeah, it's a lot of logistics, and the team here has been involved in a lot of different things. We've got Ramadan coming up right after the event, so it never a dull moment. So yeah, a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's stressful for sure. Has your, like every time I've talked to anyone involved with Tasmeem, especially through this podcast series, every time I hear somebody or I myself describe it as a conference, there's this like sort of like knee-jerk brow furrowing.
Yeah.
And I wonder what's a better word to describe it, and why is it not a conference?
Well, I mean, you've got all the various terms. You got conference, you've got symposium, you've got, I'm sure academia has 18 different, I'll go out and get a thesaurus and I'll let you know all of the different, possible terms. But to be honest, and again, and I hate to keep harping back to 2015, but, that one has seen the full arc of construction and execution and rehashing afterwards. But we specifically did not want to call it a conference. We referred to it as a festival. But to be fair, when I first started coming into these things, they were more like conferences, talking heads, people coming in and giving a lecture. is a series of workshops a conference? Is it the Tasmeem workshop series? Is it, I think one of the other elements of under construction was to give a connotation of activity, to be active. If you're in a conference, there isn't that sort of premise of activity. You're there to absorb knowledge, but not necessarily in an active way. So that's, I think, why people shy away from the term, because in recent years, there has been more of a focus on people learning by doing as opposed to learning by listening. And I think the reference to conference just kind of leaves people feeling like, oh, I'm going to sit there with a notepad and hear important people say important things. And there will be that. But to me, the core is sitting in a room with, maybe a dozen, 24 people at most, and learning how to do something or hearing somebody talk about something that you didn't know about.
All right. So if anyone's ever been to Education City, VCU is surrounded by all these other institutions, and there's countless museums. There's a million people who care about the arts, care about education, care about design. And so I'm curious about the partnerships that you guys have had or forged that is making this Tasmeem possible.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the other things that's happening this year is that it is VCUQ's 25th anniversary. VCUQ was the first school on the Education City campus, followed by a spate of notable institutions, a gorgeous National Library, Mataf, the Contemporary Art Museum. And yes, and in that sort of sense of all of these organizations, whether they know it or not, are in need of design services. And we always want to get the students out into the public, such that they, A, the public knows about them, and B, they know about the public. But I specifically wanted to involve other organizations, both here in Education City and farther afield. So we have engaged with everybody from EarthNA, which is a QF organization looking at sustainability, and they are running a really interesting program on architectural heritage and this idea of placemaking. But cool. It is very much about interventions that bring places to the people and people to the places. And so that is very much a design consideration. We're working with QM, as I mentioned. The Bicycle exhibition is going to host the bicycle making project. We have corporate partners as well. So From, which is a design studio, which also employs some VCU grads, is going to be running a workshop in their offices in M7. Another relationship that's been super interesting has been with Sasol, who are one of their big community initiatives is accessibility. And so they are engaging with us with this accessibility workshop and promoting what they see as, and I don't mean to demean it, but it is an ESG goal of theirs to promote accessibility. And so they're active participants in bringing this message of accessibility to the program. We are currently, talking to Ashgal in Doha. If you talk about construction, you have to talk about Ashgal. They have, successfully transformed this country over the last 12 years to be able to accommodate, hundreds of thousands of people coming for the World Cup, building stadiums and roads and whatnot. So it seemed only appropriate to engage with them as a partner in the event. The other, and I probably should have had notes on this, Clay Encounters, which is an organization that is run by an alum who currently teaches here, but is part of the creative community, very connected to VCU, but also very, integral to that kind of community feel that the design world brings. So teaching people how to spin throw pots and work with clay. And so they're going to be running an interesting workshop with an Italian ceramicist. So a little bit of here and there, all sort of coming together. So yes, that and again, students are involved in this not only to learn skills, but to meet people and to see opportunities for them out in the community.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, in the end of the day, your students need to get hired somewhere, right? So it makes sense to bring the industry in.
Education is building these students to go out into the community, and to bring that connection is, to my mind, a big part of an event like this.
Yeah. It's funny, even the term under construction, for anyone who's been to Doha over the last 12 years, like the city has been under construction. You couldn't walk for more than, a minute without seeing some yellow tape saying, don't walk this way. We're building the sidewalk. We're building this building. We're building this road. I wonder if at some point you think it's going to stop being under construction.
I think, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of people have asked me, they say, under construction has sort of negative connotations. It's closed, you got to drive around it. And my feeling is that under construction should mean improving. It should mean we're making things better. And I have heard from a lot of people. So I lived here from 2010 when Doha was awarded the World Cup, and I left in 2016. And I saw certainly a lot of the construction, but otherwise I'm coming back and I'm experiencing it after many years of not living here. And one of the refrains that I hear is that now that it's all been done, the World Cup happened, kind of like a Tasmeem. The World Cup was Qatar's Tasmeem, and it's done. And now all of this infrastructure is here, and people are saying the city is amazing. They're all, you're not stuck in traffic forever. There are all these new places and, public spaces and, and things. And they're just saying it is a lovely, lovely place to be. And that is what construction brings you. That the fruits of that labor are what you are there to enjoy. And so, again, that's the positive spin on under construction. You are improving it. You are making people better designers. You are making a creative community that adds to the larger community and creating an environment that we all want to live in.
I don't think if I were putting money on it, I feel like the emotional state of being under construction in a place like Doha is going to be there for a while, right? It's going to be there. It's just part of the DNA of the place.
And I think that, and one of the nice things about having the heritage people, so the people who are saying, okay, look, there is a need to build new things, but we have a lot of things that we already have. And let's think about how they can be incorporated into this, and that everything shouldn't always be fresh and new and shiny. Otherwise, you lose that connection to the past. You lose that heritage, that cultural touch point. And I certainly have sensed in the students over the years, they've moved because their neighborhoods have changed. The throughway came, and they call them corridors here, I believe. That came through a neighborhood and it caused its change. I didn't even recognize the neighborhood I lived in when I came back for the first time after COVID. They had built up all this stuff. I didn't even recognize. I drove right by where I lived and didn't even notice it. It's destabilizing.
Crazy.
But it is part of the process. And how do we adapt in that way?
Okay, I think this is probably a good place to stop right now. This is, as listeners know, this is part of a longer series exploring the history of Tasmeem, this year's conference, but also the future and the legacy and where we're going. So I'm happy we're having this conversation. This will be the first of many focusing on this year's under construction themed event. And so, yeah, Richard, thanks so much.
Thank you. And look forward to the forthcoming episodes.
Yes. And if you are looking to find information online, you can see the VCU Qatar account on Instagram. That's probably a good place to start. VCU Qatar. Thanks, everybody.